Yeah, if you want to. You got good eyes then.
I think it's a good idea we're sharing the mic because when I stumble, Rob will pick up, and when he stumbles, we'll work as a team as we always do. I think before we get to virtual fencing, we need to share a little bit about where we've come from, because it is about the mindset of looking at things that are fit in line with our vision and what we aspire to do at Mystery Park, west of St Lawrence. And I guess it hints there that it starts with the vision. And our vision for our family and our business is to be profitable, positively cash flowed, expandable, whilst nurturing the health of our family, our animals and our landscape. And while we're really passionate about that, there's lots of tools and management change that's happened along the way that's helped us get to where we are now and help us work in the future aspiring to great environmental stewardship and grazing excellence.
So before we get into that, I was just going to give you a bit of a brief history from us. My family drew the block back in 1925, so we're like fourth generation there. We have 6 budding kids that are all very passionate about the agricultural sector coming through. So we're really driven to nurture what we've got and expand it to give them every opportunity to become part of agriculture as well. As probably like everyone, we started off as a stocked business. Like we had X amount of cattle in each paddock, and that's how it was. That paddock runs so many head. But after a while, we were starting to question, is this viable? Are we able to sustain being able to do this? And we embarked on we went to GFP school back in 2002, and that really opened our eyes up to, what we could potentially do. So after that, we came back home. We stuck all the cows that had been used to running in that paddock all together with other cows in one paddock. They didn't like it very much. They all hung on to whichever side they come from. We were getting rest into our country, and we could certainly see results from that. It was starting to really show us what we could do. But I don't know if Ainsley did, but I had a paradigm about single wire electric. I could only see that the conventional 4-barb fence was how we were going to fence the place up, and to do it economically, well, you couldn't fence up 20 hectare paddocks like that. You just couldn't afford to. But I've gotten over that paradigm, and we embarked on, only a few years ago, we set off to do split it up into smaller paddocks, like 20 to 40 hectare paddocks, and under single wire electric, and the results we saw. We really saw the benefits that we were chasing. With the rotation, we could see the plants, and that were really getting stronger and stronger, but we weren't getting the production out of our cattle. But since we've split it up small and we put more intensity into it, we've got animal production happening.
And so, and I think everything that Jim and Jeff and John have shared today was so relatable, because it's actually the journey we went on, and so then it became about water and water distribution, and how we were getting patterns, grazing patterns centred around that water, even when our walking distance was less than a kilometre, and so beef 2018, the kids were scouting around all the trade stores as they do, and they discovered virtual fencing and the neck bands, and said, this is what we should, can we have a go at this? And I guess that's a key driver for us, is that we do have the younger generation coming through, and the technology and ag tech is not strange to them. It's actually almost an expectation of doing things a little bit differently. I did have a great photo of that I stuffed up, but of Rob and Hamish leaning on a crowbar and looking down a fence line, and we thought we were going to get smarter. So Rob was going to put the crowbar up and buy our 17-year-old son a crowbar for his birthday, and then all of a sudden we realised we could get smarter again and potentially try some technology. And before we get into the technology too much, I did want to speak about all the ground rules that go with the technology, because the technology is just, in our experience, it is just a tool to manage grazing, and so all the really important things like monitoring and measuring and incorporating rest and looking after the diversity of our species are underpin what we're doing. And I think just what I'm trying to show in the photos that we're using today are our country type. We are timbered. We do have improved pasture, but we're a slightly lower rainfall than Mackay. But still, very much summer dominant, very coastal, grow a big body of feed very quickly, and our protein content disappears quite quickly. April the 25th, that's our grass budgeting date, and more often than not, no matter how many cattle we have, that's April the 25th last year. And I think that's probably familiar to everyone. The other thing that we underpins our management is the collecting of the poo, and testing that so that we can actually plan our supplementing out. And I guess the final thing we wanted to give you before we talk specifically about the virtual fencing is that through the growth of the, as we call it, the paddock between our ears, and learning different things, and focusing on profitability and focusing on gross margins, we've certainly shifted our mindset from actually having to breed and wean a calf and sell a store steer, if that's not going to work for us in that year. And so we've used agistment and we've used trading, and also breeding, but a mix of those enterprises to actually drive that bottom line, because without being a profitable, if we go back to the vision, if we're not a profitable and positively cash flow business, we're going to have to put too much pressure on our country to live the lifestyle that we want to. And so then, again, and the reason I've put this up, I think I said in our bio, I'm a bit attracted to bright, shiny objects and technology, and so we've used Maya grazing quite extensively to help us keep records of what our paddocks are yielding, and also to plan our grazers, and make sure we're incorporating that rest. But I think the really powerful thing that it's given us is that opportunity to forecast out to our, and I'm not sure what I screenshotted there, but to August, yeah. I think this was done in December, yeah. And that's, I think Jim was saying before, measuring our long-term carrying capacity. So through the grazing management change that we had, when we started and we sat down with RCS and Terry McCosker and we worked out our long-term carrying capacity, I think we were sitting at 12 stock days per hectare and per 100 mil of rain, yep, sorry. And now we've, the last 3 years we've been sitting at 18 and we've, the blue line there showing our rainfall, the green line's actually showing our livestock days per hectare per 100 mil. We actually went over our benchmark in March this year because it's been, I think our rolling rainfall is only sitting at about 60% of what it should be. But I think the reason I showed that is the powerful tool about looking forward rather than always looking back.
And you can, if you go back, yeah. So if we get our average for the next, you know, till August there, which is definitely, you know, is generally not a big heap of rain, we've actually come below our 18 STHs with the current stock that we have on hand. So we know with that we can carry them through till the end of August quite comfortably.
I think it'll actually go out to the end of December, mid-December, but it's not showing there. So, and again, just showing how we're incorporating that rest and measuring that rest and planning that rest into our paddocks. So that brings us to virtual fencing and the work we've done with Adjacent. So in September last year, or it was probably August, Adjacent's approached us about conducting a commercial trial with 500 head with the virtual fence. We obviously had to meet some criteria, and it was quite an intense trial for 45 days. It was a month long of intensity, but there's the 5 to 10 days that it took to train the cattle, educate the cattle, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But so while there's a cost in being involved in being an early adopter of technology, I think the learnings for us have been huge, and we're more than happy to answer anyone's questions outside of what we talk about here. So the neckband, which Nicole has on the trade display table at the back of the room, is installed, is basically clipped on around their neck in the head bale. It was pretty, I think we were putting one every...
I think we sort of did about 40 an hour, so it was quite slow.
And then the cow was released out of the head bale. They jumped up and down and shook their head like they had were like a kick rope on them. But then quite quickly, so our observations were that they ceased that in about 10 minutes. We then actually put them out into a paddock, a very familiar paddock to them. Because our cattle have been shifted a lot, they don't have a homing corner as such now. And we put, so using software on a computer, we were able to draw a fence line on those cattle that they did not know where was. Their cues for that fence were going to come from an audio signal, and if they didn't respond to the audio signal, they would get a pulse. So one of the measures, so they, like all good stock management, I think you could stuff the training up, and I think, but it's just like whether you're mustering them on a bike or a dog or you've got a rogue cowboy in a helicopter. I think anyone you could stuff that up. so it just still those good stockmanship skills apply. So we put the fences on them, and Nicole might even correct me if I'm wrong, but they're officially trained when, so the software is actually measuring how much interaction the cattle are having with the fence and if they're responding to the audio versus the pulse. So quite quickly, and I think I would say it was less than 10 days when the cattle started to reach those metrics that they're able to measure. So I think about 80% of the mob were interacting with the fence, and 80% of the time, and I can look at this data on my iPad now, 80% of the time those cattle were actually responding to the fence via the audio cue before they actually got to the pulse. And it's very clever. The algorithms in it often astound me. So it actually is also directional. So if the animal actually goes through the fence and goes into the other part of the paddock, and obviously if they get a couple of pulses, they might start to move with speed. It has a pace accelerometer, and so it will actually automatically switch off, so the animal's not actually being buzzed down the paddock. It will actually turn off and give that animal some time to think. So then if the cow actually turns around and faces where she's supposed to be, back towards where her mates are, it will actually give her no cue. It will let her graze back towards her mates. As soon as she's faced away from the fence and heading in the wrong direction, it will then actually give her an audio cue followed by a pulse if she doesn't respond. So as you can see, so we've actually had the neck bands on the cattle for 7 months now, so since September last year, and the cattle are very comfortable with them, and we have had no concerns about. People often ask us, do they rub on their necks, and does the solar panel, which is, I'm not sure, yeah, you can see a solar panel there. We took quite a few neck bands off for some of the cattle that were getting sold last week, and there was not one rub mark or any animal welfare concerns at all. And interestingly, some of the neck bands were swapped out for new neck bands, and I can talk about that issue a bit later. So the cattle that we took the neck bands off, again, we had to catch them in the head bale, took them off and put a new one on, and you would think that the animal might go, hell, I'm not having that back on my neck, but they actually just stood there, put it back on, and you let them out of the bale, and they actually they didn't buck or kick or play. They just, I think they're very used to them now. So going back to grazing, and so it's a newfangled object, and it's a bright, shiny object, and I'm very conscious that I can be attracted to those things. However, what's our experience been from a grazing tool? We think it's really made us pull up on electric fencing. It's made us think there's actually another way to manage our grazing and incorporate that rest. And because the cow now carries the fence with her, so you can actually spell or rest any country. You can, using the water infrastructure example, we had a paddock, and it was about 100 hectares, but the cattle watered at one end of it, and they obviously grazed more heavily at one end of the paddock, even though it wasn't that far to walk to the other end. But we've all seen, the graphs of how the grass gets longer in the back corner. There was another trough through in a paddock behind that paddock, and we were able to actually cut the fence, undo the fence, open up a panel of fence and draw a virtual lane from the back of the paddock around a trough and actually get the cattle to water at a different watering point without actually having to build a physical lane, without having to... so we actually changed their grazing patterns. So now our grazing patterns are limitless. Some of the glitches.
With that, like you build a fence. Well, the fence is there. You're not going to go and pull it down. But with the virtual fence, we don't have to have that fence in the same spot next time. Like if there's a part that needs a bit more rest, well, you can exclude that. Also, in that trial that we did in September, they were trialling. It's called an exclusion zone within inside a paddock. So we were able to fence off a cattle camp where the cattle used to bear as anything. The cattle would camp in this clump of timber. We fenced it out, and it was really interesting watching. They'd be walking along, they're going to go to the camp for a camp, and then they'd get the audios and they'd pull up, and then they'd walk around the other side and they'd go in and get an audio. And not one beast went into that camp to have a camp. So that really, cemented it for us that the capabilities that this had, exceeded what we thought it could do.
So another feature that we found quite useful now is when we want to move the cattle from, and so in some instances, our physical fences have actually become a hindrance rather than a help. So if we want to move cattle from one paddock, traditional paddock, to the other, we can use the virtual fence to do that. So we can actually go out and open the gate and then actually turn a mob move on that mob, and the fence, and obviously you're drawing the area that you want to move those cattle to and from. The fence then moves as slowly as the slowest moving animal. And what we've noticed with the animal behaviour is as soon as I turn that fence off, there's no indicator to the cattle that the fence is turned off or the fence has changed. It is just their grazing behaviour where they're just like walking along, eating the grass, eating the most palatable grass. Obviously, the grass in front of them is more palatable. They will try to get that, and then they go, oh, I didn't. I don't think they even know where that fence line was. They just know that they can keep eating more palatable grass in front of them. So that's definitely the lead cue for them. So with the mob move, the momentum of the cattle, you can see the mob start to move, and we've had it on. I was going to go to one of the features for us, was that the mob move had actually stopped because one animal had stopped, and so Rob went actually out into the paddock to see why the mob move had stopped and why one animal had actually stopped, and the heifer had actually gone down with 3-day. And so we were able to turn the fence off that heifer with 3-day, which then allowed the rest of the mob to keep moving. So if you think traditionally you would have left one cow behind, you would have had to go back, pick her up, put her through the gate, shut the gate, catch her up with the mates. But with this, we don't actually have to shut the gate because when the cattle get to the new paddock, the fence is actually stopping them from returning. However, the heifer without the fence on was able to quickly, when she was feeling better, catch up to her mates. When we knew that she'd integrated with the herd, we were then able to put a fence back on and she was again in the mob. And so the data that we're seeing on our cattle is quite intriguing. So that's I think I took that this morning. Yes, I did. So we're doing a big swap around of neck bands at the moment. And so we've got 390 unfitted and 151 animals fitted. We're going back to fit some more of those tomorrow. But those green... Those green dots are the animals. The dotted line is an old fence that's not switched on. So I can draw as many dotted lines and dotted fences over my map overlay as I like. The white block line. Orange lines are physical or proposed fence lines. The white line is the area that those cattle are in. I think they're in about 12 hectares there at the moment. There's 151 animals. Actually, and here's another interesting thing, there's actually 150. Those cows were weaned last week when they were getting their neckband changed, and one cow is halfway home looking for her calf, and I would never have known that one cow was missing. However, I can spot her on the map, on our map as a green dot halfway home. So, how are we going for time? 10 minutes. So some of the, I guess, the tricks have been, once the fence is on them, and you need to use either your iPad or your laptop to switch it off. And Rob isn't in the habit of carrying an iPad or a laptop in his pocket. Early on in the piece, I went to town, and Rob was going to shift the cattle with the horse because they had to actually shift past another mob, so hence they were using the horses. And he got to the paddock and he rang me, he said, "You switched the fence off on these cows, didn't you?" And I said, "Was I meant to?" And he couldn't move the cows because they actually had a virtual fence on them. It's lucky that we're very well supported by adjacents, and I could actually make a quick phone. And Rob was, 40 minutes from the house, and any technology to turn it off. I was able to get someone to switch the fence off for me. So it's actually made us a bit better at, thinking about and planning out our day. It does take, so those are reporting in, and here when I've taken that screenshot, they were last updated 3 minutes ago. They can take up to 20 minutes to report into the base station. And because we have quite a bit of timbered country, we've trialled it in the timbered country, and they do check in, but sometimes they take a little bit longer. So they might be in the bottom of a creek or a hollow and haven't reported back to the base station. So they mightn't check in for 2 or 3 hours, which could be an issue if you were needing to turn it off in a hurry, because they need to check back into the base station to get their next, their update. Other question, and I guess we're just talking to the questions that we get asked all the time. They have a mechanism, and anyone is, oops, gone the wrong way. They have a counterweight under their neck, which actually keeps it in position. So, we've had a few, and I think this cow was a good example. Cattle love to, you can see my camera's picked up the buffalo fly load. Suckers and trees and all sorts of things that they rub up against. So it has a mechanism in it that I think 250 kilos, when they pull back, it actually releases. And so quite a few people have asked me, how many drop collars do you have? How many have they lost? 500 collars, 7 months, half a dozen have been lost. We had a few put that counterweight in the mesh that was our float cover, and obviously the counterweight got stuck. They've pulled back, got that 250 kilo load, and then it's released and we've picked up the neckband. So we've had half a dozen that have actually fallen off. But the beauty of this is that you can actually go and find them exactly where they are because they've got a GPS locator. And my 13-year-old son loves nothing more than getting a GPS, like a, what do you call that, geocaching? Yeah. So that's been one of the questions. And it's technology. And so it doesn't work when it doesn't work. So the day of having no physical fences, I don't think is realistic. And obviously the research with the neck bands has been around for a while, and Cyro's done a lot of the work. It's still new technology that has some bugs. And so at the moment we've had a few buggy things happen of late, and at the moment we have lots of batteries in low power recovery, which means we're able to geolocate the cattle. However, the fence is not working on them, and a few people, like all good graziers, keeping an eye on costs, have said, can you do 50% of the herd? When 50% of them aren't getting the signal for the fence, it doesn't work.
If you got one animal that has dropped the collar, she'll just go anywhere. She won't care that her mates are back there. They're stuck where they're supposed to be, and she's off, found the nice fresh feed to go and find. They're quite naughty when they haven't got it on. They know where. No, they haven't. So, yep.
So in summary, for us, the virtual fencing has been another tool to help us manage our grazing, and it certainly doesn't override, and it's certainly not a silver bullet to account for matching stocking rate to carrying capacity and how that changes seasonally. And I guess I've just put that up to show that we are currently running about half our stock numbers, because that's the season that God has gifted us with, and it's not it's up to us to manage as best we can with what we've got. And the other thing about virtual fencing is it's really just enabling us to continue to do and have a business that we can operate in, that actually supports our vision and the lifestyle that we want to lead with our family.
Thank you, Rob and Ainsley, for your insight into your farming lifestyle. And that's a beautiful picture. I love it. It's gorgeous. So that's yourself and your kids. Very sweet. Very interesting technology. I know it's still in a trialing phase. And you said there's, common questions around the economics of things, and maybe Nicole can help on that question as well. But Rob and Ainsley farm on a really large property, but how would a technology like that, how could that be adapted in a smaller sense? Would that be ever economically worth doing? Like, what's happening with commercializing this whole technology, and are prices going to drop eventually on the collars? Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so it can definitely be used small scale. There's no limitation to the size of your property or how many animals you have. The neck bands are interchangeable. You can have it on your 50 weaners today, and you can have it on your 50 cows tomorrow. Both instances, it's still profitable. You're not having to make physical fences. You're not needing to put a bulldozer in there and knock down your trees for it. You can go around it. It's good for your waterways, erosion, large scale or small scale. That's always a good thing.
It's definitely interesting to see where that technology will go. But Ainsley, what do you have to
I'm
say?
happy to talk a little bit about the economics too. So when we finished the type trial, and obviously we're in a beta program with Adjacents now to continue using them, and at the end of last year we said, okay, we like the technology, we think there's a place for it. How does it stack up economically? Because if you, and just using some of our numbers, and if you go, if you were going to put it on, we would put it on every one of our cattle eventually, but 5,000 head, working out it's a lot of fencing, and our paradigm bust has been that you can't actually compare it directly with the cost of a fence, because I think the physical cost of a fence, no matter if it's a 4-barb fence or a single wire, will actually win on the day. But it's actually, for us, it's actually measuring the grazing management, the increase in carrying capacity by improving our grazing management long term. We've done some work with RCS around this, and they created this nifty little spreadsheet for us that actually showed that no matter what the cost of the collar within reason, if the cost of the collar was $20 or the cost of the collar was $300, it actually wasn't the cost of the collar that was actually getting us the big benefit. The big benefit was in improving our grazing management, improving, creating smaller paddocks, more rest, improving our grass utilisation and the biodiversity of our grasses through that rest, and our animal production and our long-term carrying capacity was lifting, and that more than paid for the virtual fence. And I think that was a really big paradigm shift for us, because that's one of the other questions is, okay, it'd be cheaper to build the fence, and I would fully agree with that.
Okay, have we got any questions or comments from the floor? Yes, I'm coming.
Come over here.
First of all, congratulations for having a go at something that's really out of the box. The solar panel, what happens if you have a week of and that solar panel's not as effective on that situation?
So I'll pass this to Nicole too. I do know, so when we went into low power recovery mode or whatever we've done, the tech glitch we've had of late, I kept asking, because we actually haven't had that many rainy days this year, but we were in a period of about 5 days with no sun and whatever, and Adjacent's assured me that wasn't because of the solar panel not charging. It was actually another glitch, more hardware technical related. And Nicole might want to talk about this trial in Tasmania with, or going to be with low light, so a lot less light than Queensland.
Certainly. Thank you. So the power issues we mainly come across is when there's a bug within the firmware. So when there's a bug in the firmware stopping the collar from doing what it's meant to and working at full capacity, it drains the battery because the collar's having to think all the time. Instead of having the rest for 10 minutes and then it talks to a base station and then it rests for 10 minutes. So when it's constantly needing to talk, it runs its battery down. We've done trials in New Zealand and we haven't had any problems with the solar panels. Generally, they're working really well and we actually don't come across that problem too often. Was there a second part to that question?
So the question was if you have to recharge the batteries.
Yeah, so you certainly can recharge them. They're rechargeable. They're a lithium battery. We do it quite often with our trials because we run them dead and then we charge them up and run them dead and charge them up and run them dead. From a commercial point of view, you probably really don't have to do that too much or at all. It's more for us, but we certainly can. We have swapped out batteries once the collars, because we're still in the trial phase, we're not commercial. We're hoping when we're commercial this won't be a problem at all.
Nicole, how many trials are there happening in the region at the moment? Is Annesley and Rob the first ones, or...?
Not the first ones, I don't think. We do one at Janban, Tony Bonges. He's had an ongoing trial for quite some time as well. We've used Mick Alexander in the area as well. Strathalbyn too. We've just collared 600 cows at Strathalbyn this week. So that's the next upcoming one. At home in Southeast Queensland, we have been running trials for about 2 years straight, between 50 to 200 head, ongoing, forever changing firmware, forever testing new developments, make changes to the collars, we'll test it. It's not until we're happy with it at our trial site before we take it out to a commercial setting and then we test it there.
It's pretty cool when you've got to have the cows at the yards reporting into a little aerial to get their firmware update. I actually think that's pretty funny.
It's come a real long way. So we used to have to plug the collars into a computer to update the firmware. It's all now done through Wi-Fi. So we've got a box we can set up at a trough or in the yards, and you can run your 100 head in, and as long as we can get them within a certain 20 or 30 metres, I think, from the Wi-Fi box, they'll update remotely.
Back to the floor. Any other comments or questions? I'll start with you.
Do you have the collars on breeders? How old have the calves got to be? Do they have the collars or?
So we've had the two different mobs we've trialled it with. One was a trade mob, and the other was cows with. In the official trial, they weren't allowed to have calves. That was because of data.
It's because of ethics. So we're only ethically allowed to test on adults, not breeding animals at this stage. We just haven't got the approval yet. There are proposed trials for cows and calves. We've already done a cow and calf trial in New Zealand, but we do need to do more before we're commercially allowed to do breeders.
Yeah, and so since the official bit, we with Agisons, that mob there actually had they had calved and they had their weaners on. Yeah, they had their calves, but the calves didn't have the neck bands on because the calves, and it's the same with the electric fence. They actually go under the electric fence, and they did the same with the neck band. So the calves fed out further than the cows. Now that the calves are weaned, that's what we're going to actually put the neck bands on tomorrow.
Okay, I've got another question here.
Do you have problems with cows chewing on the collars?
No. No. The webbing around their neck after 7 months is a little bit frayed, but that's just like wear and tear. It's not. Yeah, they don't seem to lick or. Oh, I guess they do, but it's not prevalent that they're actually chewing each other or anything like that.
We've got some more questions on this side of the room.
And the collar itself is very,
sorry.
very robust. Like, as you can see up there, they're really robust. We've caught a few in the head bale. We've got an air-operated head bale. We've caught a few flash banging it, and you wait to hear all the cracks and that, but they don't.
Sorry, I just have another question here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask on the maintenance side of things. So especially with calves, the growth rate. How does the collar handle the growth rate? And what's in that 7 months you've been trialling? Have you had to bring them in to the yards more often and muster them?
So this was another really key economic decision, and it was using some data from DAF around how much weight a cow or an animal loses in the yards. And so it's all to do with the growth rate of the animal, and I'll let Nicole give the technical bits. So that was a really a bit of a problem for us because we were worried that we were going to have to get them in the yards, adjust all their neck bands, time in the yards. That would be lost production. There goes any economic gain from better grazing management because it all disappeared in the yards. And so we through RCS we actually plugged some of that data using the DAF data about how long cattle have been in the yards into the program, and then so 7 months on, we're not high growth rate country. We're not Gippsland and Victoria. We're not New Zealand. We're certainly not Tasmania. So we're very, we say we sort of that 0.38, 0.4 over 12 months. The last 3 months, so when the collars went on September through till probably mid-January this year, was definitely our dry season. So we had no growth rate. So the cattle have put on around that 0.8 since January through to April. We have adjusted some of those neck bands, and while we don't have the specific data, those neck bands have been on those animals, the same animals, for 7 months. We think that on the younger cattle, we've probably adjusted about 40% of them. And when the Adjustants fellow, Tom, was with us last week, I said when they came into the yards, so we've actually checked the neck bands and tried to coincide it with an animal management reason for the cattle coming to the yards, whether it was a dipping or a preg test or a botulism needle, whatever. So we're coinciding our cattle coming to the yards with a neck band fitment check. When they came in after a high growth period in April, I said to Tom, he said, oh, do you think they're going to be too tight? And I was worried when he said that as they were coming to the yards. When he actually went through the cattle, I said to him, how many were you worried that they were a bit too tight? And he said about half a dozen. So that's our experience. However, I'll let Nicole explain the growth rate thing. Thank you.
So like these guys have said before, and it's really important, is the adjacent neck band is a tool to help you become really productive. So from an animal management point of view, you don't stop managing your animals. We recommend a fitment check roughly every 3 months. Ideally, you can fit that in with something else. We're developing or trying to develop a strap that maybe stretches and gives a little bit in case of emergencies, like you can't get to them. We have found we've got like stitching on the straps, which sort of indicate so you can fit the counterweight evenly on both sides. We found between the straps, which is probably, I don't know, like that much, you're looking at 150 kilos in weight difference between that much. So we have run numerous trials where we have set that collar up that tight, where it looks uncomfortable on the poor little things, and it doesn't leave any marks. It's quite amazing how it really doesn't impact them too much. We are working on the system to actually send you an alert to say, look, this neck band's too tight. You need to have a look at it. So we have implemented and trying to implement lots of safety features to try and stop things from going wrong. But it does not take away from your animal management. You still need to look at your animals, you still need to check your troughs and make sure they have access to water.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, I'm probably going over time. But from the growth rates for calves, we just don't fit calves. You're looking at weaner weight and up.
Thanks, Nicole. We'll finish off with a final question from Bruce.
Can you access individual data from individual animals, like the amount of walking they've done for the day or stuff like that?
Actually, yeah, and sorry, thank you. I should have put a slide up for this. So any of those animals that I had before, those little green dots, you can click on that animal and you can see his tracks for the last 24 hours, I think.
You can stretch it out longer, yeah.
Yeah, I always go, have a look on Nicole's computer, but it's really cool because you can see where they camped. You can see.
It shows you pulse.
Yeah, it shows you where they've. I had one before that had actually been out and had a little wander, and where it had been stimulated to come back. It's very cool. You can waste a lot of time looking at that.
Okay, let's finish it with that. Thank you so much, Rob and Ainsley and Nicole.
Thank you.